Welcome to our 17th class on the Christian basics, or for my Lutheran teenagers out there, confirmation. Every week we aim to bring you biblical content that will help you in your new or emerging walk with Christ. I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Lutheran in Houston, Texas. And this week we are wrapping up our all too short look at the Old Testament and focusing in on the resettlement of the Promised Land. Let's roll. Well, what I've tried to do in these past 16 classes is really give a quick view of the Old Testament and the story of God's people, how He called them, how He rescued them from Egypt, how He gave them His law, how He gave them the prophets and the kings, and really how they survived in this land, sometimes worshiping other gods, being called back to faithfulness. Then, of course, the exile into Babylon, and now we're really at that point where they are resettling the land. Yes, eventually Israel was allowed to return home and rebuild the temple. In fact, it was funded by King Cyrus, kind of a good pagan god for the Israelite people. This is how it's recorded in the book of Ezra. In the first year of Cyrus the king issued a decree. Concerning the house of God at Jerusalem, let the house be rebuilt, the place where sacrifices were offered, and let its foundations be retained. Its height shall be 60 cubits, and its breadth 60 cubits, with 3 layers of great stones and 1 layer of timber. Let the cost be paid from the royal treasury, and let also the gold and silver vessels of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took out of the temple that is in Jerusalem and brought to Babylon, be restored, and brought back to the temple that is in Jerusalem, each to its place. You shall put them in the house of God. In fact, the temple wall that you can see if you go to Jerusalem today is from the rebuilding of the temple, the Second Temple. This whole period is known as Second Temple Judaism. Now, that temple was destroyed in 70 AD, about 40 years after the crucifixion of Christ, by the Romans when they destroyed Jerusalem. So the Israelites re-inhabit the land, and this time they want to be very careful to sort of get it right, whereas during the period of the First Temple, and certainly before that, there was a lot of worshiping of false gods. Those who managed to get back into Israel and rebuild the temple, first of all, they said it was never quite like the First Temple, even though it was rebuilt and the sacrificial system started up all over again. But the presence of God was said not to be there. And so the people now were very dedicated to the law, and they did not want to fall back into idolatry. One of the groups, or two of the groups you'll see in the New Testament, they seem to develop during this time, the Sadducees and the Pharisees. You hear about them in the New Testament, but not in the Old. And that seems to be because they develop at this time really to make sure that Israel doesn't recreate the problems of the past by being unfaithful to God. Well, the Old Testament, it's not just the historical accounts of a lot of the stories that we've told so far. There's also an entire genre in the Old Testament called wisdom literature. And there are 4 main books that comprise this collection of wisdom literature. You have the Psalms and the Proverbs. The Psalter is really the hymn book of the Bible. There are 150 Psalms in the Psalter. And then there are 31 Proverbs. There's the book of Lamentations, and there's the book of Job. Now, these books don't really tell the historical account of Israel, but they do offer a commentary on it, and you will see some interesting overlap between these books and some of the other books or some of the other historical events in the Bible. For example, King David, the greatest king that Israel had during the time of its being united, he is the author of many of the Psalms, and some of them are directly connected to famous historical events, like the time that David and Bathsheba do the unthinkable and have Bathsheba's husband killed. Or the Proverbs, for example. Many of them were written by King Solomon, the son of David. So there's definitely some interesting overlap. Now, some of the Psalms we believe are messianic psalms, just like some of the books of the prophets are ultimately about Christ, and they directly foretell what might happen with Jesus Christ. But Psalm 22, for example, we always say this psalm on the Thursday of Holy Week, the Thursday before Easter Sunday, and we believe that it looks forward to, not in a joyful way, but just simply prophesies the crucifixion of the Messiah of Israel. Here are just a few sentences from Psalm 22. For dogs encompass me, a company of evildoers encircles me. They have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Now, I believe Jesus clearly has the 23rd Psalm in mind. You may be familiar with that one. It's probably the most famous of the Psalms. It begins, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Well, in John, the 10th chapter, the Gospel of John, Jesus says about himself, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." Psalm 24 looks forward to the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ as he ascends onto Golgotha, where his cross is placed. Psalm 24 reads, "Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? And who shall stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not lift up his soul to what is false, and does not swear deceitfully." That same psalm, we believe, looks forward to the entrance of Jesus Christ on what we call Palm Sunday. It reads, "Lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may enter in." Now, the Proverbs are another bit of wisdom literature, and they're simply brilliant. I mean, they really are called wisdom literature for the right reasons. If you want to be wise, read them and seek to be obedient to what these words have to say. The main thrust of the Proverbs is that if you would heed these words, then you will live a long and happy life, even though the promises of the world look very different from the promises or blessings of the Proverbs. But here's one to consider. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. And such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessors. You see, we often think that if we're greedy, we're taking something away from someone else. But God says actually that isn't true. If you're greedy, then the life of the greedy is actually being taken from them. It's not how God intended you to live, and it is most certainly not wise. It will work against you. Also in Proverbs 1, it says, "For the simple are killed by their turning away, and the complacency of fools destroys them. But whoever listens to me will dwell secure and will be at ease without dread of disaster." You see, we live in a time when we are told that there are all of these paths to happiness. Other religions, money, notoriety, power, hobbies, friends. I mean, these are all the things that are supposed to bring us joy, that are supposed to make us happy. But actually, the Bible tells us that to seek after such things and to be covetous is foolishness. Listening to these words of wisdom, that is what will give us the security and the peace that we all seek. So here's a challenge for you. There's 31 Proverbs. Read one a day. See if you can do it for the next month. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot in the Old Testament I'm simply having to skip over. One of my favorite shorter books is Ruth, and that's where we're introduced to the concept, for example, of the kinsman redeemer. You see, Ruth is actually Jesus' great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. She's part of his lineage. And a kinsman redeemer, then, is someone who comes along in the life of Ruth. It's her husband, Boaz, and he intercedes for her on her behalf. And really, that's exactly what Jesus does for us. So right there in the Old Testament book of Ruth, you have an introduction or a foreshadowing of the gospel itself, the substitution on our behalf. Or Job is a book that I haven't been able to spend much time on. We could do a whole video series on that. I mean, it's a very, very long book in the Bible about suffering. I mean, who wouldn't want to study that? But actually, of course, there's a lot of great wisdom there and great takeaways. I'll summarize it for you. The question of Job is something like, why do bad things happen to good people, but actually bad things don't happen to good people? Bad things happen to bad people, because that's really what we all are by nature. We are sinners by nature. Well, there's so much more to talk about in the Old Testament. I would like to do more videos once this 50 video series is done, coming back to the Old Testament and looking at it in more detail. But for now, you can email me at christianbasicsclass@gmail.com. You can check out the church website, flhouston.org, for all the worksheets for the videos, and subscribe to this channel. It'll help people find us. There are people all over the world who know very little about Christianity. I am trying to put together this system of videos, the series of videos that would take someone from really A to Z, so there would be a foundation for understanding Christianity. So if it's been helpful to you, please share it with others. Until next time, take care.